Imagine a massive country, rich in hidden underground treasures, with futuristic cities rising out of nowhere and a past filled with Soviet secrets, nuclear experiments, and a government that feels more like a personal empire. Kazakhstan is one of the most mysterious and contradictory countries in the world. A place where modernity coexists with the shadows of the past, and power seems to belong to only a select few. For decades, a single man ruled with an iron fist, building a cult of personality and amassing a fortune that made him one of the richest leaders on the planet. Meanwhile, deep in the heart of Kazakhstan, ghost towns contaminated by radiation stand as silent witnesses to secret nuclear tests. Tests that doomed entire generations to illness and genetic mutations. And as if that wasn't enough, the country has also become a battleground for geopolitical rivalries, with global powers like Russia and China vying for influence over this strategic land. But why does almost no one talk about Kazakhstan? How can such a wealthy nation, the largest in Central Asia, still struggle with shocking inequalities? What secrets lie hidden in its vast steppes and deserts? Today, we're diving deep into the history, scandals, and darkest secrets of Kazakhstan, a country where the truth is often buried alongside its past. Now that you're hooked on this journey, let's start by understanding where exactly this country is and why it plays such a crucial role on the global chessboard. Kazakhstan is a true hidden giant at the heart of Central Asia. With an area of over 2.7 million square kilometers, it's the 9th largest country in the world, bigger than all of Western Europe combined. Yet, despite its massive size, its population is relatively small, with around 19 million people. This means vast stretches of the country remain almost uninhabited, covered by endless steppes, deserts, and towering mountain ranges. Strategically positioned between Russia and China, Kazakhstan has become a silent battlefield for these two global powers. Moscow still sees it as a crucial part of its old sphere of influence, while Beijing is pouring billions into infrastructure and energy, aiming to secure economic dominance in the region. And let's not forget the West, which also has a keen interest in Kazakhstan's vast natural resources, especially oil, gas, and uranium, all essential to the global economy. Kazakhstan's climate is extreme. In the summer, temperatures can soar past 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit, turning parts of the country into scorching furnaces. In winter, on the other hand, some regions experience brutal temperatures below -40 degrees Celsius, -40 degrees Fahrenheit, creating frozen landscapes that look straight out of another planet. The capital, Astana, now called Nur-Sultan, in honor of the former president, is infamous for being one of the coldest cities in the world, where icy winds challenge even the most resilient locals. But beyond its sheer size and harsh climate, Kazakhstan holds secrets that go far deeper than landscapes and geopolitics. To truly understand how this country became what it is today, we need to turn back the clock and explore its past, a history shaped by empires, foreign domination, and the heavy legacy of the Soviet Union. Kazakhstan's history is as vast and relentless as its steppes. Before becoming an independent nation, this land witnessed nomadic empires, brutal invasions, and a constant battle for survival. For centuries, the Kazakhs were nomadic people, skilled horsemen who roamed the endless plains, living off livestock and trading with neighboring empires. They resisted Mongol invasions, Russian rule, and later, the iron grip of the Soviet Union. In the 13th century, Genghis Khan and his mighty army swept through the region, absorbing these lands into his massive empire. The Kazakhs endured, but domination didn't stop there. By the 18th century, the Russian Empire began expanding into Central Asia, slowly taking control of Kazakh territory. The traditional nomadic way of life became increasingly difficult as the Russians imposed their culture, settlements, and authority. But it was under Soviet rule that Kazakhstan faced some of its darkest moments. During Joseph Stalin's regime, millions of Kazakhs were forced to abandon their traditional lifestyle and submit to brutal collectivization policies. This led to one of the deadliest famines in history, killing around 1.5 million people. nearly a third of the Kazakh population at the time. On top of that, Kazakhstan became a dumping ground for mass deportations. Entire ethnic groups, including Chechens, Koreans, and Germans, were forcibly relocated here, turning the country into a melting pot of cultures and suffering. And it doesn't stop there. Kazakhstan was one of the main testing grounds for the Soviet Union's nuclear experiments. In the city of Semipalatinsk, between 1949 and 1989, more than 450 nuclear tests were conducted, many of them in the open air. The result? Entire generations exposed to radiation, children born with severe mutations, and ghost towns where life became impossible. Even today, the scars of this era remain, both in the health of the population and in the lingering fear of this dark past. But in 1991, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, Kazakhstan finally gained independence. And that marked the beginning of a new era, one of modernization, wealth, and of course, secrets carefully kept in the shadows. Now that the country was free, what would happen next? To answer that question, we need to talk about the man who would dominate Kazakhstan for decades, Nursultan Nazarbayev. But before we dive into this enigmatic leader and the power struggles behind the scenes, let's explore a side of Kazakhstan that few people imagine. Its breathtaking landscapes and the unique attractions that make it one of the most exotic and surprising destinations in the world. When it comes to tourism, Kazakhstan might not be at the top of the world's most popular destinations, but it should be. The country is home to some of the most surreal and untouched landscapes on the planet, making any traveler feel like they've stepped into another world. From snow-capped mountains to canyons that rival the Grand Canyon, from lakes with unbelievable colors to futuristic cities rising in the middle of nowhere, Kazakhstan is a true hidden treasure. Let's start with one of the most breathtaking places. Lake Kandy, a natural wonder that looks like something straight out of a fantasy movie. Nestled in the Tian Shan Mountains, this lake's crystal-clear turquoise waters have submerged an ancient forest, leaving petrified tree trunks rising eerily above the surface. The sight is simply unreal. Another mind-blowing destination is Charin Canyon, often called the younger brother of the Grand Canyon. With its towering red rock formation sculpted by time, this canyon offers stunning hiking trails and jaw-dropping views. And if you think Kazakhstan is all about wild nature, wait until you see Astana or Nur-Sultan, the country's capital. Built almost from scratch, this city looks like a metropolis from the future, with sleek glass skyscrapers in bizarre shapes, golden monuments, and ultra-modern architecture. One of its most intriguing landmarks is the Bayraktar Tower, a massive structure symbolizing a golden egg resting in a nest of metal branches, an homage to a Kazakh myth. Then there's Khan Shatter, which may look like an ordinary tent from the outside, but inside, it's an entire shopping and entertainment complex covered by a translucent dome that maintains a tropical climate year-round, even in the country's freezing winters. But not everything is picture-perfect. Travelers visiting Kazakhstan should be aware of a few challenges and quirks. The language barrier can be tricky, as English is not widely spoken outside major cities, and public transportation isn't always the most efficient. Additionally, while the country is generally safe for tourists, certain areas, like the old nuclear testing zones in Semipalatinsk, are still hazardous due to lingering radiation. That said, traveling through Kazakhstan is a one-of-a-kind experience, a mix of tradition and modernity, raw nature and visionary cities. But behind this image of a growing and developing nation lies another reality. A billion-dollar economy fueled by valuable natural resources that don't always benefit the people as they should. And that's exactly what we're about to explore next. Kazakhstan is a country of extremes, and its economy reflects that reality perfectly. With vast reserves of oil, natural gas, and uranium, it is one of the most resource-rich nations on the planet. But here's the question. If there's so much wealth underground, why is inequality still so widespread? While a small elite accumulates staggering fortunes, many Kazakhs struggle to get by in a system that benefits only a few and leaves the majority on the sidelines. To put things into perspective, The average monthly salary of a Kazakh worker is around 280,000 tenge, roughly $600. But this number hides a major issue. While the capital and larger cities concentrate the best-paying jobs, rural areas still suffer from low wages and poor infrastructure. The cost of living also varies dramatically. A person spends about 60,000 tenge, $130, per month on food, while renting a one-bedroom apartment in central Almaty or Astana can range from 150,000 to 250,000 tenge, $320 to $530, depending on the location. But the true backbone of Kazakhstan's economy lies in its natural resources. The country is the world's largest producer of uranium, controlling almost 40% of global production. This makes it a key player in the nuclear energy sector, with massive contracts involving Russia, China, the United States, and Europe. On top of that, oil and natural gas account for a huge portion of Kazakhstan's GDP, with foreign companies investing billions to tap into these resources. But the big question is, where does all that money go? The answer lies in power and wealth concentration. For 3 decades, Kazakhstan was ruled by a single man, Nursultan Nazarbayev. While he modernized the economy and attracted foreign investment, he also built a highly centralized system where corruption and political favoritism became deeply ingrained in the government structure. Even after officially stepping down in 2019, he maintained significant behind-the-scenes influence, ensuring that his family and close allies remained in control of the country's most profitable industries. And this is where we enter the darkest side of Kazakhstan. Financial scandals, political repression, and protests that ended in violence reveal that behind the futuristic cities and promises of development lies a country where inequality and authoritarianism still weigh heavily on its people. But what happens when people rise up against a government that seems untouchable? That's what we're about to find out. Behind the modernization and promises of growth, Kazakhstan hides a dark side that few people know about: corruption, political repression, and an elite that got rich at the expense of the people have shaped the country's recent history. For more than 30 years, former President Nursultan Nazarbayev ruled with an iron grip, accumulating power, wealth, and turning his name into a true cult of personality. Cities were renamed in his honor, statues were erected, and even after his so-called retirement, his influence remained strong. But in January 2022, public frustration exploded. It all started with a sudden spike in gas prices, a vital resource, especially in regions where winters can be brutal. What began as an economic protest quickly turned into a nationwide uprising against the government. The streets filled with demonstrators demanding change, and the government's response was brutal. Authorities declared a state of emergency and ordered security forces to open fire on protesters. Hundreds of people were arrested, and the true death toll remains unclear. Some sources estimate over 200 victims. To suppress the unrest, current President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, Nazarbayev's hand-picked successor, made a radical decision. He called on Russia for military support. Moscow quickly sent troops to stabilize the country, a clear reminder that, despite its independence, Kazakhstan is still within Russia's sphere of influence, and the Kremlin wouldn't hesitate to intervene to keep it that way. And what about corruption? That's a whole different story. Kazakhstan has been linked to multiple international money laundering investigations, with staggering sums of wealth siphoned off by former government officials. Where did all that money go? European bank accounts, luxury mansions in the UK, and secret investments in offshore tax havens. Meanwhile, the average citizen still struggles with economic difficulties, poor infrastructure in many regions, and a lack of freedom of speech, where even mild criticism of the government can lead to persecution. But is all hope lost? Kazakhstan is home to a resilient people, a younger generation more connected to the world than ever before, and a massive potential for change. The country's future remains uncertain, but one thing is clear. History is still being written, and the Kazakh people have already shown they won't accept a future dictated by an elite that only looks after itself. Maybe one day, Kazakhstan will be able to transform its vast wealth into a future that is fairer for all. Kazakhstan is a land of extreme contrasts, a country of unimaginable wealth and striking inequality, of futuristic cities and forgotten villages, of a historically resilient people and a government that has long tried to keep everything under control. But despite all the challenges, signs of change are emerging. The 2022 protests were a turning point, proving that the people are no longer willing to passively accept the decisions of an elite that grows richer, while many struggle to survive. The government knows it must adapt, and some reforms have already been announced, albeit slowly. At the same time, with the growing influence of technology and social media, access to information is opening the eyes of many Kazakhs to new possibilities. The truth is, Kazakhstan has everything it needs to become a global powerhouse. Vast natural resources, a strategic position in Central Asia, and a resilient people who have already overcome invasions, famine, and repression. The future is still being shaped, and the question remains: will Kazakhstan transform its immense wealth into prosperity for all, or will it remain under the grip of a privileged few? If history has taught us anything, it's that this land has always been home to warriors, and maybe it's only a matter of time before that fight leads to real change. The world is watching, and the fate of Central Asia's largest country might still surprise us all.